Viewers, did you read the commentary in some of our leading newspapers today? Did you hear a cabal of ex-foreign secretaries and some experts and journalists trying to tell us that Hasina deserved to be thrown out of power because she was authoritarian? They said that while she delivered economic progress, it was never going to be enough because people equally crave democracy and civil liberties. One know-it-all YouTuber even described the scenes of loot that you can see on your screens, murderous political partisanship, where Hasina's party workers were sought out and killed, and also unvarnished bigotry as the culmination of a second liberation struggle, if you please. If people around the world were genuinely so possessive of their democratic freedoms, Singapore would have by now been the epicenter of the world's most violent pro-democracy protests. After all, Singapore is an example of one of the most policed one-party states. So are the numerous nations of West Asia, so is China, and of course Russia. But are the Chinese, Russians, and West Asians marching their leaders out of their countries? No. What the Indian left liberal ecosystem is not telling you is the full story. The fact is that while Hasina was an erratic Democrat, I'm not denying it, viewers, and there is no point in trying to deny it because the hard facts tell you otherwise. And that people were genuinely upset with rising nepotism and joblessness. There would not have been a regime change had it not been for a nudge from a shadowy foreign hand. Evidence suggests that China, through its regional cat's paw Pakistan, has affected regime change. The Chinese have been upset with Hasina for not rolling out the red carpet for Beijing and for favoring India, especially in the awarding of big projects. The Chinese wanted in. Hasina, aware of how Chinese influence in Sri Lanka, Maldives and Pakistan played out to the detriment or ruin of those nations, was wary of giving China a free hand. Hasina was also not specially enamored of Islamists, which evidently also didn't go down well with China's so-called brother-in-arms Pakistan. Islamabad is always looking for strategic depth against India, and Hasina was unwilling to let Dhaka become a nursery for Islamabad's ISI-funded jihad factories directed against India. Given that both China and Pakistan were not on the best of terms with Bangladesh, they had a motive to topple Hasina. If it is so apparent from the facts at hand, why then is the left ecosystem burying the obvious? The answer is politics. Yes, politics, my friends. The ecosystem's analysis is not meant to be an honest assessment of the crisis in Bangladesh. On the contrary, their views are a thinly veiled political message aimed at intimidating our own Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Regime change is the threat being held out to Modi. And if you think it isn't probable, then look at the numerous invitations that the Indian opposition has given to foreign powers to intervene in India. Look at the pregnant pauses, viewers, against nation states like China. Look at the chorus to engage nation states who are inimical to India like Pakistan. But before we go any further, let's examine the facts dug up by India's intelligence establishment. Viewers, these protests were not accidental. They had been planned meticulously. And the grounds to create animus against Hasina was laid by videos that were populated by the Chinese propaganda machine on TikTok. TikTok, viewers, is freely available in Bangladesh. And on these platforms like TikTok and several others, videos highlighting the increasing unemployment and rising poverty were put out. for ordinary Bangladeshis to watch, and they induce resentment against Hasina's regime. This began, viewers, a few years ago. Then, viewers, the Chinese intelligence reportedly infiltrated Bangladeshi universities through various education and student exchange programs. 5 universities in Yunnan were tasked to teach Bangla language to Chinese students, who are then sent to institutions in Dhaka as part of exchange programs to act as intelligence assets and establish funding channels for student organizations. They would encourage Bangladeshi students to avail of scholarships, etc. These students then would go back to Chinese universities where they would slowly be brainwashed. And this model, viewers, has been also noticed in America. In some of the top established colleges of America, the Chinese students get in there, they are actually intelligence assets, and then they begin propaganda against America. And you can see how that is played out in the American elections. Hundreds of student protesters who were part of the anti-quota agitation were funded by China to help them raise their aspirations, realize their aspirations. Over time, they've become a ready army of grateful volunteers. Obviously, if you are being given all sorts of little legs up in life, you are going to be grateful to your patron. To test the commitment of Bangladeshi students, many protests have been organized. One in specific was at the Dhaka Press Club, backed by the China International Student Union, another shadowy organization. Workers from the Jingju group in Bangladesh were seen chanting pro-China slogans in Mandarin, indicating a well-coordinated effort to mobilize support for Chinese interests within the country. And therefore, it is no coincidence that a large number of protesters who hit the streets as part of the Chhatra Shivar, the students group, actually are anti-India. China has adopted a similar model in Maldives and Sri Lanka to change regimes there, and we have seen that also. And we've also seen how they have been accompanied, those change of regimes, by public disorder, mayhem, rioting. And the common theme has been invective against India. China is also bankrolling Islamists through Pakistan and Bangladesh. BNP chief reportedly met Pak ISI assets in the Middle East. Pak top diplomat even changed his social media DP to a picture of the protest, indicating support for the Chhatra Shivar protest. This has been attested to by India's own Foreign Minister, Mr. Jaishankar. Infiltration of China-funded Pak ISI assets explains the silence of Islamist groups on China's atrocities against Uyghurs. A large number of these Islamist groups, viewers, as you know, stand up for the greater Ummah. But on China, they're very, very silent. You have to ask yourself why. Why is it that in Pakistan and Bangladesh, no one talks about the internment of Muslims in China? Prime Minister Hasina cut short her visit to China in July after Beijing did not extend diplomatic courtesies commensurate to her stature in office. That was a very clear signal from Beijing. There is now no doubt that the new regime will be pro-China in Pakistan. Smaller red carpet will be extended to India. We'll, of course, not take anything for granted. We'll put these questions out to some of our guests tonight. Major Shamsher M. Chaudhry, former Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh, is here with us. Let's begin by asking him some simple and straightforward questions. Yes, sir, Mr. Chaudhry, there has been, of course, some amount of disaffection, popular disaffection against Sheikh Hasina.
Some amount?
Some amount.
Only some amount?
Some amount,
Only some
sir.
amount.
Some amount.
Okay,
it's expressed itself.
So you're starting your narrative by negating the exact amount of disaffection.
I don't know.
Oh,
I was not there on the ground.
No, you are. No, you are.
So I'm not there on the ground, Mr. Chaudhry.
No, so if you're not on the ground, then don't be judgmental.
I am only telling you. I'm only telling you. No, excuse me.
No, but you are being judgmental.
Major Chaudhry, let me frame my question. Why aren't you letting me frame my question? Why is everyone so scared of telling me to keep quiet? I'm only putting out a thesis. You can come up with 5 or 6 good points to completely negate the conclusions I've drawn. I've given you an opportunity, Major Chaudhary. I'm not taking it away from anybody. I'm not lowering anyone's mics, etc. So I just want to ask you, how is it that the Islamist regimes in Bangladesh, who are very sympathetic of the larger cause of the Ummah, let's say in Palestine, etc., are so quiet about what is happening in China? If there is no Chinese incursion, pressure, influence.
Well, let me start with, instead of involving foreign powers into the gameplay, by doing that, you're undermining the extent of disaffection among the general population in Bangladesh against the against the former government of Bangladesh. People of Bangladesh like to vote. I can see my friend Pinak Chakrabarti here. He has been Deputy High Commissioner here. He was High Commissioner here. And we even met in Delhi very recently on 22nd June over a dinner. I know him. I know his family very well, and we are very good friends. I'm a freedom fighter. I fought for this country. I was wounded in the war. I always say that I had a Chinese bullet in my body fired by a Pakistani soldier. So you should know where I come from and where I stand. Now, our position has always been that we do not comment on internal affairs of any other country. That has been our standard practice from the very, very beginning, starting with Bangabandhu's father when he became Prime Minister immediately after liberation. A liberation award that was hugely supported by India, and we are eternally grateful for that. Now, the main thrust of the liberation movement was democracy, accountability, and welfare of the people. Now, over the last decade and a half, forget about the external factors. Let's talk about the external factors later on if you want to. You deny the people of Bangladesh the right to vote by choosing an election commission of your liking without serious consultation among anybody, by doing away with the non-party caretaker system election time government that was extremely popular in Bangladesh. It might not have been 100% perfect, but it could be rectified, it could be reformed. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The main reason why the Awami League government did that was to perpetuate power. And one thing Bangladeshis do not like is perpetuation of power. Because since 1991 and in 1996, and then again in 2001 and 2008, 4 elections were held under the non-party caretaker government. All of them are considered more or less, well, relatively fair, relatively participatory, with 50 to 60, 70% voter turnout. And each one of the elections resulted in the change of the government through the ballot. Through the ballot, not through the mass movement, through the ballot. In 1991, we had a presidential system of government, which was imposed by Sheikh Mujib himself under the Baksar law. In 1991, the newly elected Prime Minister Khaleda Zia and the leader of the Awami League, Sheikh Hasina, was the parliament, sat together to change the system of government to make it more representative, and we switched back to the parliamentary system of government, which is in practice in India, which was enshrined in the 1972 Constitution, which is a very strong document for democracy. That constitution also had secularism built into it. I agree, in post-1975, the word secularism was replaced with social justice. Bangladeshis are inherently non-communal, non-fundamentalist people. We don't like communalism, we don't like fundamentalism. We want to treat everybody on an equal footing in a democratic society. Now, the Sheikh Hasina's government, when it came to office, when it amended the constitution in 2009 or 2010, they adopted the Islam as a state religion of Bangladesh, which was incorporated by a military general, Hassan Muhammad Irshad, and the Awami League did not remove that from the constitution. They also brought in secularism. So here you have a kind of a situation where you have secularism and Islam as a state religion in the same constitution? Why did the Awami League not change, not remove that clause that Islam is the state religion of Bangladesh? That was brought in by a military government, not a democratically elected government. And as a responding to pressures from Islamist forces, the Hasina government over the last 10 to 15 years appeased Islamic forces. In 1995, 1994, the Awami League government had series of meetings with the Jamaat-e-Islamists. Footages are all available still today in the archives, willing to overthrow an elected government with the help of Jamaat. It was a kind of a surreal scene where the daughter of Bangabandhu sitting across the table with Jamaat leaders, working with them, and to do this. So appeasement. And recently, under pressure from other Islamist forces like the Hafazat and all that, textbooks have been changed in Bangladesh to suit the demands of the Islamist forces.
Okay.
So this has been going on in Bangladesh over a period of time. But what really affected the government was the election process.
Okay.
Where we had 60 to 70% voter turnout in the past.
So you're saying, Major, that the linchpin of the problem was the fact that she was an authoritarian leader. That's what you're basically saying. And let's discount everything else. Okay, one second.
No, but also appeasing the Islamist forces.
Okay, so she was also an Islamist appeaser. Okay, so all the conventional narrative built around Sheikh Hasina today has been completely demolished by Major Chaudhry. Now, I want to bring in Sushant Sareen, and I also want to bring in General G.D. Bakshi, and also the ex-MEA Secretary, and of course, Senior Fellow of the IPCS, Abhijit Mitra, to get a sense of how they are looking at things. First things first, Sushant Sareen, I don't understand this. If the Bangladeshis their reflex go-to reaction is so secular, etc., how does a protest against quotas turn into a protest against India and Hindus? Why are they being targeted? Why are their places of worship being targeted? If there is such a secular backbone, how is it that the Hindu population, minority population in Bangladesh has come down from 30% to 8%? How is it that you have a situation where US and Canadian courts have labeled the BNP, the principal opposition to Sheikh Hasina, as a, quote, undesignated terrorist organization, unquote? How does that happen?
No, it happens because that's the way Bangladeshi politics has been run. The fact is that there is a kernel of truth in what the Major has just said. Sheikh Hasina came in as a popular leader, but I think over the years has turned into a bit of an authoritarian person. She did clamp down on democracy the way most people understand it, and there were pressures being built in the system. The fact also remains that while she did try and take Bangladesh back to the old secular ethos with which the country had been created, there were a lot of people in the Awami League who used to carry out all kinds of unspeakable crimes against the minority communities, and the government of the day would be more or less a mute bystander to what was happening. So the ethnic cleansing of the Hindu community in Bangladesh has continued both under quote-unquote secular governments as well as under Islamist governments or ultra-nationalist governments like BNP. That has been a common trend, number one. Number two, the thing is that in these particular protests, Rahul, let's face it, there were pressures within the system. Those pressures, the quota thing became a bit of a trigger. And many of these characters from the BNP, from the Jamaat and others bandwagoned on what was happening. There's a menagerie of Islamist groups running amok in Bangladesh, some of which have, with whom Sheikh Hasina has also played footsie. She's cracked down on them when she wanted to, but she's also played footsie with them. So, it's been a bit of, a kind of a pig's breakfast in Bangladesh over the years. And a lot of what we have seen is that one thing on which Bangladeshis are united is that the Hindus are the new Jews of Bangladesh. That they are open game. that you can target them at will, you can steal their property, loot their properties, kill them, do whatever the hell you want to do, and you are never really brought to justice. We haven't heard of many people being brought to justice, and we've seen footages, we've
So
seen.
are you saying it's
But
wrong? Okay, so one second. Let me then open this up further. Ayyar Mitra and General Bakshi and Mr. Chakravarti. So let me just quickly run you now past their views. General Bakshi, are we now supposed to completely rule out the fact that there has been foreign interference, meddling behind the regime change? Because this was just popular anger. This was, in the words of several analysts here in India, a second coming.
Look, Rahul, let me be absolutely unequivocal. This is a second Maidan, right? This is a second Orange Revolution. This is a replica of what was done in the Arab Spring, right? The playbook is exactly the same. Let me give you a few facts, and for the edification of my friend Major Chaudhary, the simple fact is that when General Asim Munir, former DG ISI, visited the United States, he had a long session with Victoria Nuland, right? We all know Victoria Nuland's role in the infamous Maidan insurrection in Ukraine, right? What exactly was he doing with Victoria Nuland? Number one. Number two, in 2016, we have information that ISI operatives contacted Begum Khalida Zia's son, Tariq Muhammad, in London.
Tariq Rahman.
And they discussed
Tariq
with
Rahman.
him these machinations to try and overthrow the Sheikh Hasina regime. The next meeting was in Saudi Arabia, followed up. The Islamic, Chhatra Sangathan, IRS, that was funded by the ISI. The ISI has acted as the cat's paw, not just for the CIA, but also for their newfound Chinese masters and mentors in Beijing. It is a totally, yes, there was a kernel, there is always a kernel of disaffection. If you are talking of the anti-reservation stir, 30% reservations to Mukti Jodhas like Major Chaudhary himself, who was wounded in that war. We fought that war. We know how much we sacrificed. We know how much the Mukti Jodhas sacrificed. Against the rape of their women, against the killing of 3 million Bangladeshis, against the pushing out of 10 million refugees into India. He was wounded. I'm very surprised that he now supports the anti-quota agitation. I'm a little flummoxed. The simple fact is, Rahul, that the Supreme Court of Bangladesh had intervened and reduced the quota from 30% to 5%. There was no basis rational for continuing with this agitation. The quota was an excuse.
Okay.
The target was Hasina Wajid because she had refused to give the St. Martin's Island to the Americans. She had refused to have Chinese submarines coming into Chittagong port. She had refused to give the Teesta project to China.
Okay, two divergent points of view now.
Maidan Revolution 2.0.
So we've got three strains of thought. One.
Yeah, but the Sheikh Hasina government bought submarines from China.
Okay, I mean that's true. Look, I'm not saying that she was very conscious of keeping China happy, but maybe China did not feel welcome enough.
So when you buy Chinese submarines from China, whom do you use them against?
Okay, one second. Abhijit Iyer Mitra, where do you come in on this? The entire liberal street here in India says that this is a vindication of those people power that when ignored, when people's concern for civil liberties are ignored, this is what happens. It's obviously a nudge, wink, wink message being sent to Modi here, baselessly, but nonetheless. Do you agree?
No, Rahul, because this so-called people power or whatever nonsense you want to call it, this is just a street veto. Let us be clear about it. There is no electoral way of validating if these people are a majority or not. Tomorrow, in Delhi, you can assemble a crowd. You offer them biryani and nimbu pani.
That's true.
Any political party, give them 50 rupees and whiskey. Or you don't even have to give them whiskey. You give them moonshine. You can get about 1 lakh of people out on the road in Delhi. Bangladesh is no different, right? If anything, it's much easier to congregate people out there. So let's get this whole street power nonsense out of the equation right here, because street power is fundamentally never democratic. It is a street veto of an election. The only way of ensuring that somebody is actually popular is through an election. And let's recall what the election results were the last time round. Number one. Number two, we need to understand that, even foreign countries can only do so much within Bangladesh. I don't buy American interference. I don't buy Chinese interference. Sure, she certainly didn't, endear herself to America or endear herself to China. She cut her China visit short. We still don't know why by a few days. We don't know exactly why. When she went to America this time after the election, she conducted all her meetings out of the US-Bangladesh Chamber of Commerce. She refused to meet anyone in a US government building because she was quite piqued at the way they condemned the Bangladesh election, but welcomed the very transparently rigged Pakistan election. And you know exactly how that election was rigged.
Yeah.
Now, if you check why this disaffection all comes to the fore, remember a lot of the books in Bangladesh were cooked. This has been a consistent worry about economic figures being cooked. But one of the figures that escaped attention was the fact that last year, sometime early last year, we saw motorcycle sales in Bangladesh fall by 21%. Now, that is very significant because that shows you the economy is going south. And that is a very crucial segment because, once you've come into a little bit of money, it's not a car you buy, it's a motorcycle that you buy first. Everything fundamentally is related. I mean, you saw what happened in Sri Lanka as well. That was also brought about by economic collapse. So that would have been a very significant aggravating factor. But, I want to go back to what the Major General brought up, about the contradiction of Islam and secularism and things like that. Let us not forget that Bangladesh has had some kind of major street protest every single year for the last 15 years. And the Jamaat-e-Islami started off this whole thing against the statue of justice outside the Bangladesh High Court. Why? Because it was a woman who was blindfolded holding the scales of justice. They said it is against Islam to have this anthropomorphic representation, so on and so forth. That was the first step in getting rid of all the imagery of Bangabandhu Mujibur Rahman. That Mujibur Rahman was the ultimate target. They made the first target the statue of justice outside the Bangladesh High Court so that they could finally target. Now, this is the problem. You see, once you infuse religion into politics, it becomes a competitive race to the bottom of the barrel.
So that,
So that shows you the kind of action-reaction cycle that was happening. Similarly, the Major General mentioned that she became authoritarian, etc. What did that come in the wake of, Rahul? Has everybody forgotten the Bangladesh Rifles revolt, where they literally tried to overthrow the government, possibly even kill her, God knows what?
That's true.
After which the entire things, the statutes and everything were changed precisely to prevent that kind. And let us not forget, the BNP and the Jamaat-e-Islami were cheering those things on.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That time I wasn't active on Twitter, but I've seen lots of posts on Facebook and things like that from BNP leaders in Bangladesh cheering that revolt on. So this was all done for a very specific reason.
Okay.
It's very easy to pick out facts from a vacuum and then pass it off to retrospectively justify what has happened in the last 48 hours.
So now let's draw it all together and put it in perspective. And for that, we have ex-MEA Secretary, Mr. Chakravarti, who knows the inside outs of Bangladesh. Now, I want to come to you, sir, saving the best for the last. What will the predilections of the next regime be? We've already heard that the president of Bangladesh has issued an order seeking the release of Begum Khaleda Zia. She's going to be out. The BNP, as I just mentioned, according to all the information I've gathered, the US and Canadian courts have labeled it a undesignated terrorist organization. will we see increased radicalism now in Bangladesh, and will it be mostly directed against India? Not just the radicalism I'm talking about, but most importantly, the predilection of the next regime.
I am very tempted to compare today's situation with what happened in 2007.
Yes.
When there was chaos in Bangladesh caused by the political parties who were fighting tooth and nail on the streets, killing people. Then finally, they had put up a kind of a, very transparently partisan caretaker administration. And finally, the army had to move in to kick out those caretaker administration members and have a new one. And the new caretaker was widely welcomed, by the way, led by Dr. Fakhruddin Ahmed. And I was there as High Commissioner, so I followed it very closely. And then the army started a cleanup. And some of those who were involved, what we call the Islamic terrorist organizations, who were caught, bombing, almost creating a bombing, tsunami in Bangladesh, were convicted and hanged by that caretaker government and that army. So there are different versions of what happened. Today we are having a similar but a different version in a different context. But to say that that Bangladesh army, for example, but you asked me a specific question of what I expect from the new whatever interim. They are calling it an interim because the caretaker provision was expunged from the constitution in 2011. So you have a interim government, which I do not know who is in it. I suspect there will be technocrats and academicians, some retired generals, broadly I'm saying. And who it will, the students have demanded that Professor Yunus, the nominal laureate, lead be the
advisor,
advisor, and sort of, which is like the head of government with the members, which advisors functioning as ministers. Now, I don't know whether he will agree because, one tends to be, once bitten once and twice shy or something like that, the phrase that is there. Because he was bitten once in 2007.
True.
When the army actually promoted him to form a party and thought that he would succeed. And he did, because the two ladies, they had this so-called -2 formula. I don't know how many of you have never heard of it.
Yes, without the two.
To get rid of both Hasina and Khalida, because these two squabbling begums or warring begums were taking politics down down a road which was becoming violent and not very conducive for development. So what they did, but Professor Yunus did not succeed, and that soured his relations with Hasina. And then there were lots of cases piled on him by the Hasina government, etc. So today, what I expect, coming back to your original question, is that the initial signs show that the army is trying to give space to BNP, the Jamaat, because they think they have been ill-treated or they have been ignored, and they also are equal stakeholders in the political discourse in. So my initial reaction to that is this, that I see a pro-BNP or pro-Jamaat, some actions that are taking place, including Khalida Zia's release from jail. She was there under a court order. Of course, she got medical bail and was quite ill. And I think...
So you're seeing a BNP-dominated interim administration, perhaps...
No, I don't know. I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I'm saying that their initial moves or actions are indicative of either leveling the playing field, the political field, because they feel BNP and Jamaat have been deprived of certain opportunities. And they are even allowing, for example, I cannot understand how did they allow the mobs to go into the Prime Minister's house.
That's true.
How did they allow, why did the army...
There's an overcorrection. Let's put it like that. Overcorrection sort of happening in General Bakshi. The problem is that the Jamaat-e-Islami, the BNP, historically have been in alliance, and of course the Jamaat, as we all know, is an Islamic party accused of war crimes, in fact, during the Bangladesh Liberation War. Then you have the Hifazat-e-Islam. The BNP has been accused of having ties with Hifazat-e-Islam, a radical Islamist group that has called for the implementation of Sharia law. Of course, the BNP would deny all of this. The Muslim Brotherhood, some people say it has had equations with them. Other Islamist groups, especially the Bangladesh Islami Front and the Islamic Democratic Party. So all of this has led many people to sort of suggest, especially US courts and Canadian courts, to rule that the BNP is an undesignated terrorist organization, and that will worry India. Would it not, General Bakshi?
It most certainly would. The fact is that Jamaatul Bangladesh, that organization was involved in bombing attacks on our side of the border.
Yeah.
And and in the previous military dispensations, Irshad dispensation, Ziaur Rahman dispensation, the Pakistani ISI was allowed to reopen training camps for insurgents in Bangladesh.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And northeast insurgents were merrily being trained there. There are very serious, security threats and challenges that are coming our way with this new dispensation.
Yeah.
But Mr. Chakravarti raised a very interesting point. And let me take him up on that. General Moinuddin was the general he was talking of. Till then, Bangladesh army chiefs had the rank of lieutenant general. He promoted himself to full general, and though he was, part of the interim establishment, he stretched it out for almost a year plus, almost 2 years. So, one of the denouements would be that will this military transition arrangement also try and stretch itself out, elongate its presence?
Do you think
will
that
they
could
be
happen,
very
General
keen to
Chaudhary?
hand
Could
over?
that happen? Major Chaudhary, could that happen?
Yeah,
Well, what happened is that we have had so many, flaws in our governance system, and I'm not blaming one party or the other. I think both had played their role in, and both have been short-sighted in different forms. I was a BNP member, but Pinak knows very well, and I left the BNP in 2015 because I didn't agree with their political stance, especially how they manage the relationship with India. And
So
Pinak and I
that's what I'm
have
saying.
discussed this.
Major Chaudhary, with the BNP
So
now
what I'm
occupying
saying-
primacy on the landscape, the political landscape, India has reasons to worry.
No, we see what should ideally happen is that apparently the head of the interim government will be Professor Yunus. Now, Professor Yunus is anything but a pro-Islamist. The list that I have seen so far, I don't see any one of them being openly pro-Islamist or anything of that kind. So the best option for, in the case of the leveling the playing field that Pinak said very correctly, the need for leveling playing field, which has been unleveled many times by different forces, is to create a space between now and the next election. Bring in some fundamental changes in our election system, in our governance system. We should emulate many of the governance systems that exist in India, even in Sri Lanka, which is a much smaller country with a much smaller population. I think Bangladesh should move towards proportional representation in the election outcome. The winner takes all first past the post system has not helped Bangladesh or Bangladesh democracy, number one. Number two, we should have a bicameral legislature. So it's not just
Okay, I mean, those are all technical. I was talking more.
No. But these are issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
These are issues that need to be addressed.
Those need to be addressed by the Bangladeshis on how to govern themselves. I'm more interested in the fallout of this.
To ensure that,
Yeah.
No, to ensure that
Yes.
between now and the next election,
Yes.
there should be some space which will also allow the Awami League to regrow. Awami League is a very old party.
Of course.
It is a very large party.
But without Sheikh
It was formed
Hasina
in
there,
immediately after.
it becomes problematic.
So why should
now where is Sheikh Hasina?
Why should Awami League? No, but why should Awami League be dependent on one person?
Okay. Why should it
such
be
an old
dependent on
party.
one person? It's okay for the
It's such an
BNP
old
to be
party.
dependent on one person, not the Awami League.
Rahul,
That
It
would
is
be-
not.
ask him a
It is
question?
not.
It is
no,
not.
no.
Okay.
No party should be dependent on one person or one family.
Okay, but Khalida Zia is
That
out,
is
while
what-
Sheikh Hasina has been externed. I mean, that is very, very, very
Khaleda
disturbing.
Zia is out. Khaleda Zia is out. she's a very, very ill person. She cannot move without a wheelchair.
Okay.
Number of diagnoses. She's ineffective, basically.
Okay, she's
Yes,
ineffective. Let me just open this up.
Worrying thing is her son. So
Because-
I think there should be
Rahul, can I
choice
just
of
ask him
leadership
a
in both
very
the parties.
critical question.
Yeah, one second. Yes, General Bakshi, quick question. And Sushant Sareen, I want to bring you in on a very piquant problem
Major
now
Chaudhary,
presenting
Major
India.
Chaudhary.
Yeah. Yes.
Major Chaudhary, how do you read the across the board changes amongst the generals in the Bangladesh army which have just been announced?
You see, I left the army in 1974. So I don't even know what the internal dynamics in the army is. Frankly, I'm not even interested. And why this change is taking place, why have such an extreme action been taken, it is for the army to respond.
Well, I mean, you're talking about the fact that...
I don't know any of the generals. I don't even know their background. I don't even know what they come
this
from.
vacuum in which all these changes are being wrought, this non or untransparent way of going about things, Sushant Sareen, comment on that, and of course the worries here in India. Also, of course, the fact that Sheikh Hasina has supposedly not been, she's here, of course, given transit status, as Dr. Jaishankar mentioned in Parliament, but it has been revealed that the UK and US are not keen on sheltering her. We've also broken story that Finland has said no. So where does that leave us with regards to Hasina? Is this association, this extended stay going to cost us in some way?
No, I don't think it should cost us, Rahul. Let me just deal with this question first. I think she should be an honored guest in India. If she wants to stay on in India, maybe she doesn't. Maybe later on she gets a refuge in Thailand or some other place. That's up to her. But if India is to be her place of stay, then I don't see why we should ditch people who've been friendly to us. She might have made her own mistakes and might have done whatever she had to do. But you know, this reputation which India has that we dump our friends, I think it's about time that we belie that reputation. Number one. Number two, but remember one thing, Rahul, you know, we've spoken a lot about the associations of various parties with the Islamists. We often forget that the Awami League itself had an alliance with the Jamaat-e-Islami once.
True.
They were in power together. So let's not forget that. So that's why I said everybody's played footsie with these guys. Okay. The other thing which is very strange, Rahul, because you keep mentioning it, that the Americans and the Canadians had labeled the BNP as an undesignated terrorist organization. Don't you find it strange that they've done it to BNP? And I'm not saying that that party is a very nice and clean party. They have never done it to the Jamaat-e-Islami in Bangladesh, which is responsible for mass murders, which is responsible for all kinds of unspeakable crimes, including pogroms against the Hindu community. They are supposedly the darlings of the Americans. And even the current lobbying that was being done in the US was being done by the Muslim Brotherhood and by the Jamaat-e-Islami working together to buy, to lobby and to buy influence in the United States. And yet you see all the Americans and everybody being very blasé about parties like the Jamaat and some of these other characters. So I think that is something which we also need to look at.
Sushant Sareen, I just want to very quickly ask you this on the point of Sheikh Hasina continuing on here. Now, there has been, of course, precedent in the past. She had been living in virtual exile in India under Indira Gandhi and then, of course, returned. So this administration, interim government, whatever you want to call it, in Bangladesh will remember the lessons of history and always wonder if India is going to somehow inject her back into the political fabric.
I will tell you something. What kind of, one of the complaints against the government in India always has been that why doesn't India do something more in Bangladesh? Now, what do you want us to do? You want us to interfere in Bangladesh? No, right? But the point is that this is an influence that India will wield.
Okay.
I don't see any reason why we should be embarrassed, shy.
Interesting point.
This influence. Rahul, 1 second. We made this mistake in Afghanistan.
Yes.
Okay, we are dealing with the Taliban, but why have we dumped all our old friends in Afghanistan?
True.
We should be dealing with everybody. Yeah. Why have we dumped our old friends? So why should we dump our friends in Bangladesh simply because there's been a regime change, there's been an uprising, there's been a rebellion or whatever you want to call it? Why should we dump our old friends? That gives us influence, that gives us a certain leverage. Why should we not have it?
Let's not put all our eggs in one basket. We did that with Sheikh Hasina, some people would say, and now we may have not got a plan B.
What was the option at that time?
Okay.
Who else could we have done it with? Could we have done it with BNP, which would make all kinds of promises with folk tongue and never deliver on them? Could we have done it with Jamaat Islami?
I understand.
So people very glibly that we put all our eggs in one basket. Which other basket was there for us?
Which other basket was there for us? Okay. Let me bring one
second.
second.
Can I say something here for example?
Yes, just give me 30 seconds, Major. Major, 30 seconds. Please, I just want to bring in Abhijit Iyer Mitra on this point. Abhijit Iyer Mitra, look, fundamentally, you have a problem in the immediate with safeguarding Hindu lives in Bangladesh. Now, I'm not saying they're Indian Hindus and therefore they are qualified for automatic citizenship, but do you believe that the Indian government should perhaps announce a right to return?
Rahul, my only complaint against the CAA was that it was time bound.
Yeah.
Given the level of persecution we face in the neighboring states, it needs to be open-ended that any Hindu, Sikh, Jain, Buddhist from these neighboring countries who wants to leave and come to India must be welcomed back home, full stop. There is the whole point of being a civilizational state is you respect the right of return of all our civilizational brethren from anywhere around, right? But I just want to add one point. You know, this notion, why did all these countries, why are they denying her asylum? They want to force her to stay in India and she doesn't want to stay in India. You know why? Because she'll be painted as she has in the past as an Indian stooge. Now understand, she has never been an Indian stooge. She's not given us a lot of what we expected from Bangladesh. On the other hand, she's gotten a lot from us, including, if you remember, in the Enclave Exchange, the net winner in that.
It was generous.
Right?
Yeah.
But they want to destroy her politically because they want to show that she is an Indian stooge. Even though she has never been pro-India, she has always, her entire life, she has been pro-Bangladesh. She is a Bangladeshi patriot who's looked out for her fundamental difference with Khalida Zia is, for whatever reason, she believes that Khalida Zia's husband was responsible for killing her father. And Khalida Zia, for her part, believes that India was responsible for killing her husband. So Khalida Zia has this knee-jerk sort of hatred for India, which has always clouded her perception of India. She never sees reason in it, whereas Sheikh Hasina believed that we could grow together and Bangladesh's best interests were served by having a cooperative relationship with India. How does that make her an Indian stooge? But all these countries, Finland, UK, USA, they will try to portray her as an Indian stooge to sabotage her return to Bangladesh.
Okay, yes. Major, you wanted to make a quick point, please.
Yeah, well, first thing I would say that, the US double standards in their foreign policy is a long history. They've always been short-sighted, they never look beyond their nose, and they're paid for it. You know, once Henry Kissinger said, and Henry Kissinger said a lot of odd things in his life.
Hello. I think we've got an audio problem with the Major. Audio problem with the Major. Viewers,
can you hear me
very
now?
quickly. General Bakshi, what is expected? What is expected now? Are we going to have a government or administration, call it what you want to, in the interim that we can work with? General Bakshi, or is it going to be inimical to us?
Look, Rahul, I would be very straightforward. I do not think a government in Bangladesh can afford to be very hostile to India. It is surrounded by us on three sides. It is strong economic structural linkages, and it is in the interests of both sides to try and cooperate, to try and get a working relationship going.
Okay.
We had a similar problem in the Maldives. They seem to have come around.
Yes.
Because there are certain geo-strategic factors which don't change. Regimes may change, but those geostrategic linkages, they stand. And, power equations cannot be wished away. Power equations cannot be wished away. And there has always been a sharp polarization in Bangladesh between the Mukti Jodha camp and the Pakistan returnee camp, the so-called Razakar camp, if I may so called it, though people don't seem to like that label. So it will keep changing. No stasis is permanent. There is no permanent situation here. And I agree with Sushant. We should stick by those who were
Friends.
good to us, or those who were supportive of us, like the Northern Alliance, like Hasina Wajid. Just because the United States, just because China have
Right.
used the ISI as a cat's paw to get her out, doesn't mean she should become persona non grata in
Okay,
India.
I think those are
That
important
seems to
words.
imply
Two
that we
basic-
don't know you. You are in
Two
trouble.
basic
Who needs you?
suggestions from General
sorry,
Bakshi,
that's
Abhijit
not the
Iyer
way.
Mitra, Sushant Sareen. In the interim, the Indian government should focus on maintaining its relationships all across, specifically with Sheikh Hasina, and also perhaps contemplate lifting the bar, the time limitation on CAA, perhaps move towards welcoming Hindus back into India.